Her stepfather kept her from the mating festival, until the Alpha King demanded for her. Rowan's grip on her arm was iron, but it was nothing compared to the power that filled the room when Augustus Mason, the Alpha King, stepped in. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, everything changed. He's come for me, she thought. The question was, why? What did he want with the girl her stepfather had kept hidden for so long? Hi, my amazing family. Ready to dive into another unforgettable story? Hit subscribe and leave me a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tomorrow's story will have you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Let's begin. This was not a festival. This was the moment the kingdom's last secret cracked open. Melissa's pulse stuttered as the king stepped into the hall, and the curse inside him snarled, a soundless, starving thing that clawed straight into her dormant power. Torches hissed and died in his wake. Shadows bled across the marble like spilled ink. Somewhere in the hush, a single goblet slipped from a noble's hand and shattered, foretelling the first of many things about to break. He didn't know her name yet, but the curse did, and it was starving. The thing about destiny is that it rarely announces itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it walks into a room wearing rage-like armor, and you feel it in your bones before you see it with your eyes. That's what happened to Melissa Ravenscroft the night the Alpha King came to choose his mate. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her stepfather had made that abundantly clear. She was the hidden daughter, the quiet failure, the girl with a useless gift for healing minor hurts in a world that celebrated violence. But Augustus Mason had demanded her presence, and when an Alpha King demands, even men like Rowan Reed must obey. So there she stood, watching a broken king enter a room full of predators and feeling, for the first time in her confined life, that perhaps she was exactly where she was meant to be. The rumors were true, Melissa thought, her breath catching in her chest. Augustus Mason was broken. He moved like a storm barely contained, and the curse they whispered about in frightened tones felt real, a suffocating aura of agony and rage that pulsed from him in waves. Her own dormant healing sense stirred for the first time in her life, reaching toward that pain like a flower turning toward poisoned sunlight. The torment clinging to him was ancient and absolute, a wound that went deeper than flesh. This was not a king seeking a mate. This was a man at war with himself. He moved toward the obsidian throne at the far end of the grand hall, his steps deliberate and soundless. The sea of wolves parted before him, heads bowed in deference and terror. No one dared to meet his gaze. His presence alone devoured the space. He was taller than any alpha Melissa had ever seen from her stepfather's windows, broad-shouldered and clad in dark ceremonial armor that seemed to drink in the firelight rather than reflect it. His hair was the color of midnight, falling just past his collar, framing a face that was both devastatingly handsome and marked by suffering. His jaw was set in a permanent line of tension, his mouth a cruel slash that looked as though it had forgotten how to smile. But it was his eyes that held the true danger. They were a pale, burning amber, and they swept over the assembled crowd with a chilling precision. There was no warmth in them, no mercy, only a profound and lethal emptiness born of endless pain. Melissa's fingers trembled as she adjusted the clasp on her own worn cloak. The metal was tarnished, a stark contrast to the glittering jewels adorning every other woman in the manor's entry hall. Outside the tall windows, the last light of day bled into darkness over the Ravenscroft estate. They were leaving soon for the mating festival. For the Alpha King. For him. "You think you're coming with us?" Rowan Reed's voice cut through the bustle like a blade through silk. Her stepfather stood in the doorway to his study, his arms crossed, his eyes cold and calculating. "I've told you 100 times, Melissa. You have no place at the festival." Melissa flinched, her gaze dropping to the threadbare rug beneath her feet. "I thought, perhaps just to help." "Help?" Rowan's laugh was bitter. "You are a liability, girl. A distraction. The king is choosing a mate from the strongest bloodlines, the most powerful families. What would he want with someone like you? Someone like you. The words had been her companion since her mother's death, since Rowan had assumed control of the Ravenscroft name. Melissa was quiet, unremarkable, her wolf a faint whisper that had never fully awakened. She had always felt incomplete, as though some essential part of her was locked away, waiting for a key she'd never find. Her only gift, if it could be called that, was a strange warmth in her hands, a gentle ability to soothe headaches with a touch, to calm frightened animals with a whisper. In a world that prized dominance and strength, the ability to ease pain was seen as weak, servile. It was a gift fit for shadows, not thrones. Rowan, perhaps, a soft voice interrupted. Melissa looked up to see Clara, one of the manor servants, hovering nervously in the hallway. Perhaps Miss Melissa could attend to help with the carriages? Many hands will be needed tonight. Rowan's eyes narrowed, but he waved a dismissive hand. Fine. But you will stay out of sight, Melissa. You will not enter the hall. You will not speak to anyone of importance. Your purpose is to serve from the shadows and then disappear back to this estate. Am I understood? Yes, stepfather, Melissa murmured, her voice barely audible. Disappear. She was good at that. She had spent years perfecting the art of becoming invisible, of making herself small and silent so as not to draw attention to her stepfather's failure. Her very existence seemed to be an embarrassment he was determined to erase. If you haven't done that already, click subscribe, like this video, and let me know in the comments what you think about Melissa's stepfather. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories to you, and trust me, you don't want to miss them. Now let's get back into the story. The carriage lurched forward an hour later, and Melissa sat wedged in the corner of the servants' transport, away from the main procession. Through the small window, she watched the forest give way to the glittering lights of the festival grounds. The air grew thick with the scent of hundreds of wolves gathered in one place. Power, ambition, and barely restrained violence crackled like lightning about to strike. Muffled sounds of music and laughter bled through the carriage walls, a world she was never meant to enter. We've arrived, the driver called, and Melissa's heart hammered against her ribs. The mating festival. Alpha King Augustus Mason. Even locked away in her stepfather's estate, tales of the Alpha King had reached her like whispers through prison walls. They said he was merciless, that a curse burned through his veins like liquid fire, making every moment of his existence agony. They said he had ruled for 7 years without taking a mate, without allowing anyone close enough to see the man beneath the crown. Now, for reasons that sparked endless speculation, he had declared he would choose a queen at this festival, a political necessity to secure his line, the rumors claimed. Melissa's hands clenched in her lap. She wasn't afraid for herself. After all, she was forbidden from even entering the hall. But a gathering of such immense power was like a storm to her untrained senses. The raw emotions of so many dominant wolves would be overwhelming. Her only goal was to remain unseen, unheard, and untouched, to survive the night and return to her cage. The carriage door opened and she slipped out last, a gray ghost in worn servant's clothing. The main entrance blazed with torchlight and grandeur, but she was directed around the back, toward the service corridors where people like her belonged. She kept her head down and her footsteps quiet, every instinct screaming at her to make herself smaller. But fate had other plans. A commotion near the main entrance drew her attention. Servants rushing, someone calling for help. Without thinking, Melissa moved closer, her healer's instinct overriding her fear. A young attendant had collapsed near the doorway, clutching his chest, his face pale with pain. "Move aside," she heard herself say, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands found his temples, and that strange warmth bloomed in her palms. Within moments, color returned to his face, his breathing steadied. "How did you?" someone whispered. "Who is she?" Melissa stood quickly, panic flooding her veins. She'd drawn attention. Rowan would be furious. She turned to flee back toward the shadows, but the crowd had shifted, pushing her forward instead of letting her retreat. Before she knew what was happening, she was swept through a side entrance and into the great hall itself. The festival hall was a cathedral of sound and light. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across marble floors. Tapestries depicting ancient battles and legendary hunts covered the walls. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, aged wine, and the musk of powerful wolves dressed in silk and velvet. Hundreds of them filled the space, their eyes constantly scanning for opportunity, for advantage, for a glimpse of the king. Melissa pressed herself against a column, her senses reeling. The emotional energy in the hall was a physical weight, a cacophony of pride, desire, fear, and ruthless ambition that pressed against her mind like a vice. Her head began to ache, her hands trembling. She needed to leave. No. But then a hush fell over the hall. It started at the massive entrance doors and spread like a wave of ice water, silencing the music, stilling every conversation. The air grew heavy, charged with something primal and dangerous. Not ambition but pure, instinctive fear. He had arrived. Alpha King Augustus Mason entered the hall, and the temperature seemed to plummet. He was not flanked by a grand retinue, only by a single scarred warrior who moved like death itself. But the king needed no entourage. 3 weeks earlier, the study smelled of old leather and older secrets. Rowan Reed stood before the fireplace in his private sanctuary, watching flames devour the parchment he'd just received. The edges curled and blackened, consuming the Fate Weaver's words, but they were already burned into his memory. The girl holds the key. In the presence of the cursed king, her power will bloom like nightshade, beautiful and deadly to your ambitions. Keep her from him or lose everything. Rowan's jaw clenched. 20 years he'd spent cultivating his position, building alliances, waiting for the perfect moment to claim what should have been his. He'd been Augustus Mason's father's most trusted advisor, the man who'd helped secure the Mason dynasty. When the old king died and Augustus took the throne, barely more than a boy, already marked by that God's damned curse, Rowan had expected gratitude, recognition, power. Instead, he'd been cast aside, sent back to his remote estate with nothing but empty titles and bitter memories. But he'd learned patience. He'd learned to watch and wait. And he'd learned that even an alpha king could be vulnerable. Augustus's curse was killing him slowly, burning through his body like poison. The kingdom whispered about it in shadows, how the king's pain made him volatile, how no healer had ever eased his suffering, how he'd ruled for 7 years without taking a mate because no woman could bear to be near the storm of his agony. If Augustus died without an heir, without a clear successor, the throne would pass to the Council of Alphas. And Rowan had spent 2 decades ensuring he had the most influence on that council. All he needed was for the king to remain alone. Unmated. Unhappy. Dying. Then Melissa's mother had passed, and he'd taken in the girl out of what the kingdom called nobility. In truth, he'd sensed something in her even then, a warmth, a potential that made his instincts prickle with warning. He'd kept her locked away, isolated, ensuring whatever gift she possessed never had the chance to develop. It had worked. For years it had worked. Until 3 weeks ago when the king announced the mating festival, and the Fate Weaver's message arrived, and Rowan realized his carefully constructed future was balanced on a knife's edge. "You wanted to see me, stepfather?" Rowan turned from the fire to find Melissa standing in the doorway, her hands clasped nervously before her. She looked like a ghost in her faded gray dress, her dark hair pulled back simply, her eyes, those unsettling violet eyes she'd inherited from her mother, downcast. Perfect. Submissive. Powerless. Keep her that way. "The mating festival," he said without preamble. "You will not attend." Something flickered across her face, not rebellion, just a faint shadow of disappointment quickly suppressed. "Of course, stepfather. I wouldn't presume." "I'm not asking, Melissa. I'm telling you. You will remain here in the manor while the festival takes place. You are not ready for such an event. You would embarrass yourself. Embarrass me." She nodded, but he caught the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened against each other. Do you understand why? He moved closer, his voice dropping to something almost paternal. The Alpha King is dangerous. Cursed. The wolves who attend are powerful, violent. A girl like you, gentle, sheltered, you would be crushed in such an environment. I'm protecting you. I understand, she whispered. It. He dismissed her with a wave and she fled like a startled deer. Rowan watched her go, then turned back to the fire. The Fate Weaver's warning echoed in his mind. He would take no chances. The festival was in 3 weeks. He would keep Melissa locked away, and when Augustus Mason failed to find a mate strong enough to bear his curse, when the king's pain finally consumed him, Rowan would be waiting. The throne would be his. 2 weeks before the festival. Melissa knelt in the manor's garden, her hands buried in the soil. This was her sanctuary, the one place Rowan allowed her to spend time alone. Plants didn't judge. They didn't flinch from her touch or call her inadequate. She was repotting a dying rose bush, one that the groundskeeper had already given up on. Its leaves were brown, its branches brittle. But when she touched it, she felt that familiar warmth bloom in her palms, felt something inside her reach toward the plant's fading life. Life, she thought. Please just live. The warmth grew stronger. Uncomfortable. Almost hot. Melissa gasped and pulled her hands back. The rose bush's leaves were turning green before her eyes, new buds forming where moments before there had been only death. In seconds, the entire bush had transformed, now vibrant and healthy, blooming with deep red roses that shouldn't have been possible this late in the season. What? Melissa stared at her hands. They were glowing faintly, a soft golden light that faded even as she watched. This had never happened before. She could soothe small hurts, yes, but this was something else entirely. Melissa. Clara's voice called from the manor. Your stepfather wants you inside. Now. The glow vanished completely. Melissa stood on shaking legs, casting one last look at the impossible roses, then hurried back to the house. She didn't see Rowan watching from his study window, his expression dark with recognition and fear. 1 week before the festival. The incidents continued. A stable hand with a broken arm healed in minutes under Melissa's accidental touch. A cook's burn vanished completely when Melissa brushed past her. Each time that uncomfortable warmth grew stronger, harder to control. Melissa began to feel as though something was waking up inside her, stretching after a long sleep. Her dreams became vivid, filled with images of golden light and a voice that called to her in a language she didn't understand. She tried to hide it, tried to suppress whatever was happening. But her body felt electric, alive in a way it never had before. Rowan noticed. Of course he noticed. You will remain in your room until the festival has passed, he told her 5 days before the event, his voice cold and final. You are unwell. It wouldn't do for you to spread sickness to the household. I'm not sick, Melissa protested quietly. I said you will remain in your room. His eyes were hard. This is not a discussion. Rowan Reed represents everything toxic about gatekeeping and manipulation. People who keep others small because they're threatened by their potential. If you believe no one should have the power to hide someone else's gifts, hit subscribe. Drop a comment saying, no more gatekeepers if you're tired of people like Rowan who suppress others to protect their own ambitions. Let me know you're on Melissa's side, not his. 2 servants escorted her to her chambers. She heard the lock click behind them. For 3 days she saw no one but Clara, who brought meals and wouldn't meet her eyes. The isolation was suffocating. The warmth in her hands grew constant, pulsing like a second heartbeat. On the 4th day Clara arrived looking terrified. There's been a change, she whispered. A messenger from the king arrived an hour ago. The Alpha King he's demanded your presence at the festival. Specifically. By name. Melissa's heart stopped. What? That's impossible. He doesn't even know I exist. Your stepfather is furious. He tried to refuse, but you can't refuse an Alpha King's direct command. We leave tonight. Clara's hands shook as she laid out a simple dress. Miss Melissa, what did you do? How does the king know about you? I don't know, Melissa breathed, but something inside her did know. That awakening power recognized something, someone calling to it from across the distance. Augustus Mason, the cursed king. The warmth in her palms flared bright enough that Clara gasped and stepped back. What's happening to you? The servant whispered. Melissa stared at her glowing hands, at the golden light that now seemed reluctant to fade, and felt the world shift beneath her feet. I don't know, she said again. But she was beginning to suspect that whatever she was becoming, it had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for him. The night of the festival. The carriage ride was a nightmare. Rowan sat across from her in hostile silence, his eyes burning with barely contained rage. He tried everything to prevent this, claimed she was ill, argued jurisdiction, even attempted to send a decoy in her place. But the king's messenger had been clear. Melissa Ravenscroft. No substitutions. The Alpha King will know if you try to deceive him. Now they were almost there, and Melissa could feel something pulling at her, tugging at that awakened power inside her chest. It was like following a thread through darkness, and at the end of that thread was a presence that made her entire body hum with recognition. When we arrive, Rowan said finally, his voice like gravel, you will speak only when spoken to. You will not draw attention to yourself. You will not. He paused, struggling with the words. You will not use whatever it is you've been doing. Do you understand? I'm not doing anything, Melissa said truthfully. It's just happening. Then make it stop happening. But she couldn't. The closer they got to the festival grounds, the stronger it became. Her hands glowed intermittently now, and she had to keep them hidden in her cloak. Her heart raced. Her skin felt too tight. Something was waiting for her. Someone. When the carriage finally stopped and the door opened, Melissa stepped out into a night that crackled with power. Hundreds of wolves, all gathered in one place. But beneath all that noise, she felt one presence that drowned out everything else. He was here. The cursed king. And every instinct she possessed was screaming at her to find him. Rowan grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. Remember what I said. But Melissa barely heard him. The golden warmth inside her had become an inferno, and she was being pulled toward the grand hall like metal to a lodestone. Toward Augustus Mason. Toward her destiny. The king's chambers, 2 days before the festival. Augustus Mason stood before the window of his private chambers, his hands braced against the stone sill, every muscle in his body locked against the pain. The curse was worse tonight. It always grew worse as the moon waxed full, as though the goddess herself took pleasure in his torment. Fire crawled beneath his skin, through his veins, cooling in his chest like molten iron. His healers had given up years ago. His physicians had exhausted their remedies. Even the fate weavers could only shake their heads and speak of ancient magic beyond their ken. 7 years. 7 years of ruling through agony, of forcing himself to stand when his body screamed to collapse, of hiding the extent of his suffering behind a mask of cold authority. 7 years of slowly dying. Your Majesty. His beta, Darien, entered without knocking, the only person permitted such familiarity. The festival preparations are complete. The noble houses have begun arriving. Augustus didn't turn. Good. You're still determined to go through with this? To choose a mate. Darian's voice was carefully neutral, but Augustus heard the concern beneath it. I have no choice. Augustus closed his eyes, willing the pain to recede. It never did. The council grows restless. They whisper that a cursed king cannot produce heirs, that the Mason line will die with me. If I don't at least appear to seek a queen, they'll move against me. Let them try. I'm tired, Darian. The admission came out more honestly than he'd intended. I'm tired of fighting. Tired of the pain. Tired of... He trailed off, unwilling to voice the despair that had become his constant companion. Darian was quiet for a long moment. Then, there have been rumors. From the eastern provinces. About a healer. Augustus's eyes opened. I've seen every healer in the kingdom. None of them can even touch the curse. This one is different. The reports are strange. They speak of impossible healings. A man with a fatal wound who walked away whole. A plague that stopped spreading in a single village. The common thread is always the same. A young woman with violet eyes and hands that glow like captured sunlight. Despite himself, Augustus felt a flicker of something he'd thought long dead. Hope. He crushed it immediately. Fairy tales. Perhaps. But the most recent report came from Rowan Reed's estate. His staff speak of unexplainable healings, of a girl locked away who seems to radiate warmth. Rowan Reed. Augustus's voice turned cold. That ambitious snake. I should have dealt with him years ago. He's kept this girl hidden. Some say she's his stepdaughter. Others claim she's a bastard he's ashamed of. Darian paused. What if she's real, Augustus? What if there's a chance? The pain flared, sharp enough to steal his breath. Augustus gripped the windowsill until the stone cracked beneath his fingers. When he could speak again, his voice was rough. Send a summons. I want this girl at the festival. If Reed protests, remind him that refusing a direct command from his king is treason. And if she's just another failure? Augustus finally turned, and Darian took an involuntary step back. The king's eyes burned with amber fire, his face drawn with agony and barely contained rage. Then at least I'll know. At least I'll have tried one more time before I accept that this curse will be the thing that finally destroys me. But even as he said it, something shifted in his chest. A pull, faint but undeniable, tugging at him like an invisible thread. It pointed east, toward the Reed estate, toward this mysterious healer. Toward something he couldn't name but suddenly, desperately needed to find. Melissa's room, the morning of the festival. Melissa woke to the sound of her door unlocking. Clara entered carrying a breakfast tray, her eyes red-rimmed and anxious. You need to eat, Mississippi. We leave in 3 hours. Has my stepfather said anything? Melissa sat up, pushing her hair back from her face. She'd barely slept, the golden warmth inside her keeping her in a state of restless anticipation all night. He's been in his study since dawn. I've never seen him so angry. Clara set the tray down with shaking hands. Miss Melissa, you need to understand, the king specifically demanded you. Not just any healer but you by name. How does he even know you exist? I don't know. But it was a lie. Melissa had felt it building for weeks, that pull, that recognition. Whatever was awakening inside her, it knew Augustus Mason. Knew him like a lock knows its key. She looked down at her hands. The glow had faded to a barely visible shimmer, but she could feel it beneath her skin, waiting. Ready. What are you? Clara whispered. I don't know that either. Melissa met her eyes. But I think I'm about to find out. The journey. The carriage ride was suffocating. Rowan sat across from her in rigid silence for the first hour, his jaw clenched so tight Melissa could hear his teeth grinding. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he leaned forward. Listen to me very carefully. His voice was low, dangerous. When we arrive, you will tell the king that you are nothing special. A minor talent for easing headaches, nothing more. Do you understand? But what if? No. He cut her off. Whatever you think is happening to you, whatever power you believe you possess, you will hide it. You will disappoint him. You will make yourself so unremarkable that he dismisses you within minutes. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you want me to fail? Rowan's eyes flashed with something dark and desperate. Because, you stupid girl, if the king claims you, if your power truly awakens in his presence, everything I've worked for will be destroyed. He needs to die. Don't you understand? The kingdom needs him to die so that proper order can be restored. And you he jabbed a finger at her. You are the only thing standing between me and the throne. The truth hit Melissa like a physical blow. You want him dead. You want to be king. I should be king. I earned that right through years of service. But I can't take what's mine as long as Augustus Mason draws breath. His voice dropped to a hiss. And I certainly can't take it if some hidden healer with a God's blessed gift saves him. Melissa pressed herself back against the carriage seat, her heart racing. You're going to try to kill him. I won't have to. The curse is doing that already. All I need to do is ensure no one interferes with the natural order of things. He smiled, and it was the coldest thing Melissa had ever seen. Which means you, my dear stepdaughter, will convince the king that you're worthless. Or I will make sure you never leave that festival alive. The threat hung in the air between them. Melissa's hands began to glow, golden light seeping through her fingers. Rowan saw it and went pale. Stop that. Stop that right now. I can't. And it was true. The closer they got to the festival grounds, the stronger the power became. It was responding to something, to someone, and it would not be contained. It's not something I control. It's something I am. Rowan lunged across the carriage, grabbing her wrists. Then you'll learn to control it, or... The moment his skin touched hers, golden light exploded through the carriage interior. Rowan screamed and jerked back, clutching his hands. Where he'd grabbed her, his palms were burned, marked with perfect handprints of seared flesh. What did you do? He gasped, staring at his injuries in horror. I don't. Melissa looked at her own hands, now blazing with light. It's protecting itself. Protecting me. Unnatural, Rowan spat. You're unnatural. Your mother was weak, but at least she was human. You're something else. Something wrong. The words should have hurt, but Melissa felt nothing but a strange, growing certainty. She wasn't wrong. She was exactly what she was meant to be. And the thing she was meant for was waiting at the end of this road. Rowan spent the rest of the journey as far from her as the carriage would allow, cradling his burned hands and staring at her with undisguised fear and hatred. Arrival. The festival grounds were chaos incarnate. Hundreds of wolves from every corner of the kingdom, all dressed in their finest, all radiating power and ambition. Melissa felt them like a physical pressure against her senses, but beneath all that noise, beneath all those competing energies, she felt him. Augustus Mason. A presence like a black hole, pulling at her with irresistible force. Remember what I said, Rowan hissed as the carriage stopped. His burned hands were wrapped in cloth now, hidden from view. You are nothing. You will be nothing. But Melissa wasn't listening anymore. The pull was too strong, the golden warmth inside her too insistent. She stepped from the carriage into the torchlit night and felt every instinct in her body scream, find him. A servant approached, bowing deeply. Miss Ravenscroft? The Alpha King has requested you be brought to him immediately upon arrival. Rowan stepped forward, trying to assert control. My stepdaughter is tired from the journey. Perhaps in the morning. Immediately, the servant repeated, and there was steel beneath his polite tone. The king was quite clear. Melissa found her voice. I'll go. You will not. I said I'll go. She turned to face Rowan, and for the first time in her life she didn't lower her eyes. The golden light leaked from her hands, spilled across the ground at her feet. You can't stop this. Whatever's happening, it's bigger than you. Bigger than your ambitions. Rowan looked as though he wanted to strike her, but the servant was watching and there were guards nearby. He could only stand there, impotent and furious, as Melissa followed the servant toward the main hall. With every step the pull grew stronger. Her heart raced. Her skin felt electric. The dormant power inside her was fully awake now, straining toward something, someone who called to it like the moon calls to the tide. They passed through a side entrance, away from the crowded main hall. The servant led her down a corridor lined with ancient tapestries and flickering torches. At the end of the hall stood a pair of massive oak doors, and before them, a scarred warrior with cold eyes. Darien, the servant said, bowing. Miss Ravenscroft as requested. The warrior, the king's beta, Melissa realized, studied her with an intensity that should have been intimidating. Instead, she met his gaze steadily, her hands glowing brighter with every passing second. You're her, he said finally. The healer. I don't know what I am, Melissa admitted. But I know I need to see him. She pressed a hand to her chest where the pull was strongest. I need to be near him. Something flickered in Darian's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He nodded slowly and opened the doors. The room beyond was a private study, smaller than Melissa had expected for a king. Books lined the walls. A fire burned in the hearth. And standing with his back to her, silhouetted against the window, was Augustus Mason. He didn't turn. Didn't speak. But the moment Melissa crossed the threshold, the air between them ignited. The golden warmth inside her exploded outward, filling the room with light. At the same moment, Augustus gasped, a sound of shock and something else. Something that might have been relief. He turned slowly and Melissa saw him clearly for the first time. Not the terrifying king from the hall, but a man ravaged by pain. His amber eyes were wide with disbelief. His hands were clenched at his sides. And as he stared at her, at the golden light pouring from her skin, his entire body seemed to soften. You, he breathed. It's you. The curse fire that had burned inside him for 7 years flickered and dimmed in her presence. Not gone, not yet, but subdued. Quieted. As though her light was smothering his darkness. Melissa took a step forward, her hand extended without conscious thought. I can feel it. Your pain. It's trying to consume you. Don't. Augustus's voice was rough. Don't come closer. If I hurt you. You won't. She said it with absolute certainty. You couldn't if you tried. Another step. And another. The golden light grew brighter. Augustus stood frozen, every muscle locked as though afraid to move, afraid to hope. When her hand finally touched his chest, directly over his heart, they both gasped. The connection snapped into place like the final piece of a puzzle, and Melissa felt it. The curse, ancient and vicious, wrapped around his soul like poisoned chains. But she also felt her power surging to meet it, wrapping around those chains, pulling them loose. Augustus's eyes closed. For the first time in 7 years, the fire inside him cooled to embers. The constant agony that had defined his existence faded to a distant ache. How? He whispered, his voice breaking on the word. Melissa looked up at him, this broken king, this man she'd never met but somehow always known, and felt everything click into place. I think, she said softly, her hand still pressed over his heart, I was made for this. Made for you. And as the golden light surrounded them both, as the curse retreated for the first time in nearly a decade, Augustus Mason opened his eyes and looked at Melissa Ravenscroft not as a king looking at a subject, but as a dying man looking at salvation. Outside the study, Darian pressed his ear to the door and smiled grimly. The king's beta had seen many things in his years of service, but he'd never heard Augustus make the sound that came through those doors now, a sound of relief so profound it was almost a sob. The healer was real. And the kingdom, whether it knew it yet or not, had just changed forever. The morning after. Melissa woke to sunlight streaming through windows far grander than any she'd ever known. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The journey, the private meeting, Augustus's face when her touch had eased his pain for the first time in 7 years. Her hand still tingled where it had pressed against his chest. A knock sounded at the door. Miss Ravenscroft? May I enter? Melissa sat up, pulling the luxurious covers around herself. Yes. A woman entered, middle-aged and elegant, followed by 3 younger attendants carrying armfuls of fabric. I am Lady Margot, the king's head of household. His Majesty has commanded that you be properly attired for tonight's festival opening. He wishes you to be presented to the court. Presented? Melissa's stomach dropped. Last night I thought he just wanted to see if I could help with his curse. I didn't think. His Majesty's wishes are not for us to question. Lady Margot's tone was brisk but not unkind. He has requested your presence at the main festival tonight. You will stand with the royal party. The room seemed to tilt. Stand with the royal party. Be visible to everyone. Everything Rowan had forbidden, everything she'd spent her life avoiding. I can't, Melissa whispered. I don't belong there. Lady Margot's expression softened slightly. The king believes otherwise. And I have learned in my many years of service that the king is rarely wrong about such things. She gestured to the attendants. Now we have much to do and little time. If you would be so kind as to stand. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of fabric and pins, of measurements and fittings. The gown they created was unlike anything Melissa had ever worn, deep violet silk that seemed to shimmer gold in certain lights, matching her unusual eyes. The neckline was modest but elegant, the sleeves long and fitted. When they finally allowed her to see herself in the mirror, Melissa barely recognized the woman staring back. Beautiful, Lady Margot declared. The king will be pleased. But Melissa's hands had begun to glow faintly beneath the silk, and she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would change everything. The festival hall, evening. The grand festival hall had been transformed. Thousands of candles floated overhead, suspended by some magic Melissa didn't understand. Crystal chandeliers refracted their light into rainbow cascades. Long tables groaned under the weight of elaborate dishes. And everywhere wolves in their finest attire moved like sharks through glittering water, circling, assessing, hunting for advantage. Melissa stood at the edge of the royal antechamber, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might escape her chest. Through the ornate doors, she could hear the roar of conversation, could smell the overwhelming mixture of perfumes and power. You look terrified, a rough voice observed. She turned to find Darian leaning against the wall, his scarred arms crossed. The king's beta regarded her with those cold, assessing eyes. I am terrified, she admitted. I've never been in a room with this many people. This much power. Yet you didn't hesitate last night. You walked right up to the most dangerous wolf in the kingdom and touched him without fear. That was different. That was... She trailed off, unsure how to explain the pull, the certainty that had filled her. Instinct, Darian finished. The bond recognized what your mind hadn't yet accepted. He pushed off the wall, moving to stand beside her. A word of advice, healer. The wolves out there will see you as a threat. A nobody from nowhere, suddenly elevated to the king's attention. They'll try to tear you down. Don't let them. How do I stop them? Stand beside him. Let them see that he's chosen you. That will be protection enough. Darian's expression turned grim. Though I'd watch out for your stepfather. He's been circling the hall like a rabid dog, whispering to anyone who'll listen. As if summoned by his name, Rowan's voice drifted through the partially open door. Absolutely inappropriate. The girl is damaged, unstable. Just this morning she had some kind of fit, burned my hands when I tried to help her. Melissa's blood ran cold. He was already working to discredit her, to make her seem dangerous and unhinged. Your Majesty. Lady Margot appeared in the doorway. It's time. Darian offered Melissa his arm. Ready? She wasn't. She would never be ready. But the golden warmth inside her pulsed with certainty, and she found herself nodding. They walked through the doors together. The effect was instantaneous. Conversation didn't stop so much as stumble, hundreds of eyes turning to assess the unknown woman on the beta's arm. Melissa felt their attention like physical weight, felt their curiosity and speculation and immediate judgment. Who is she? Nobody. Just some provincial girl. Why is Darian escorting her? Look at that dress. The king's colors. Rowan stood near one of the pillars, his burned hands hidden beneath leather gloves. When he saw her, his face went white with fury. He started toward her, but Darian's hand tightened on Melissa's arm. "Keep walking," he murmured. "Don't acknowledge him." They moved through the crowd toward a raised dais at the far end of the hall, where a single throne sat waiting. The crowd parted before them, some with curiosity, others with poorly concealed disdain. Melissa kept her chin up, kept her eyes forward, even as her hands began to glow faintly beneath her silk gloves. Then the temperature in the room dropped. It was subtle at first, just a shift in the air. But within seconds, frost began to form on the surfaces of wine glasses. Breath misted in the suddenly frigid atmosphere. And the massive oak doors at the hall's entrance swung open with a boom that echoed like thunder. Augustus Mason had arrived. He wore black ceremonial armor chased with silver, a fur-lined cloak that swept behind him like wings of shadow. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face, the intensity of those burning amber eyes. He moved with lethal grace, each step measured and silent, and the crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. But it was his expression that made Melissa's breath catch. Gone was the vulnerable man from last night, the one who'd gasped with relief at her touch. This was the Alpha King in all his terrible glory, cold, remote, dangerous. Until his eyes found hers across the crowded hall. Time seemed to stop. The noise faded to nothing. Augustus's steps faltered for just a fraction of a second, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, hunger, and something that looked almost like reverence. Melissa felt the pulse snap taut between them, an invisible cord that vibrated with power. The golden light inside her surged in response, and she saw Augustus's eyes widen as though he could see it, feel it, the same way she felt the curse fire that still smoldered inside him. He changed course, moving directly toward her instead of the throne. The crowd held its collective breath. "Miss Ravenscroft." His voice was formal, but Melissa heard the undercurrent of warmth beneath it. "You honor us with your presence." She sank into a curtsy, not because protocol demanded it, but because her legs were shaking so badly she needed the excuse to bow. "Your Majesty." When she rose, his hand extended toward her. "An offer. A choice." Melissa placed her gloved hand in his, and even through the layers of silk and leather, the connection blazed to life. Augustus's eyes closed briefly, his jaw tightening as though he were holding back some overwhelming emotion. "Walk with me," he said, and it was not a request. He led her toward the dais, and Melissa was suddenly, acutely aware of every eye in the hall tracking their movement. The whispers started immediately, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. "The king is touching her. He's never touched anyone. Not like that. Who is she?" Then Rowan's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs with practiced precision. "Your Majesty. A moment, I beg you." Augustus stopped, his entire body going rigid. When he turned, his expression was glacial. "Rowan Reed. We were not aware you intended to address the crown this evening. Forgive the interruption, Majesty." Rowan bowed low, but Melissa could see the calculation in his eyes. "But I feel duty-bound to warn you about my stepdaughter. She is unwell, unstable. Just this morning she attacked me, see?" He held up his gloved hands. "Burned me without provocation. I fear her presence here may be dangerous to your guests." A ripple of alarm spread through the nearby nobles. Melissa felt panic rising in her throat. This was it. The moment Rowan had been waiting for. He would turn everyone against her, make her seem like a threat. "Is this true, Miss Ravenscroft?" Augustus asked, his voice deceptively mild. "Did you attack your stepfather?" Melissa's voice failed her. How could she explain? That her power had acted in self-defense? That Rowan had threatened to kill her if she didn't sabotage Augustus's hope of healing? "Remove your gloves, Reed," Augustus commanded suddenly. Rowan went still. "Your Majesty? Your gloves. Remove them. Let us see these terrible burns." "I'd rather not display." It was not a request. Steel entered the king's voice, and several nearby wolves took involuntary steps backward. Slowly, reluctantly, Rowan removed his gloves. The burns were real, perfect handprints seared into his palms. But Augustus studied them with an intensity that made even Rowan shift uncomfortably. "Tell me, Reed, how does one sustain defensive burns on the inside of one's palms?" Augustus's eyes were cold and knowing. "These marks suggest you were gripping something, or someone, tightly when you were burned. Not recoiling from an attack, but restraining." Rowan's face flushed. "I was trying to help her, to calm one of her fits." "You were trying to control her." Augustus's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. "You were attempting to suppress her gift, a gift that could benefit the entire kingdom because it threatens your own ambitions." The accusation hung in the air. Several nobles gasped. Rowan took a step back, his expression morphing from false concern to genuine fear. "You forget, Reed, that I have my own network of informants. Did you think I wouldn't learn of your meetings with disgruntled council members? Your whispered suggestions that perhaps a younger, healthier king might better serve the kingdom." Augustus moved forward, his presence overwhelming. "You've been positioning yourself for a coup. Waiting for my curse to kill me so you could seize power. That's, Your Majesty, I would never. And when I summoned the one person who might ease my suffering, you tried to keep her from me. Locked her away. Threatened her." Augustus's hand tightened on Melissa's, protective and possessive. "You burned because her power protected her from you. As it should." Rowan looked around desperately, seeking support, but found only cold faces. No one spoke on his behalf. In the world of wolves, backing a failed coup was suicide. "I see I've miscalculated," Rowan said finally, his voice hollow. "Perhaps I should withdraw." "You will do more than withdraw." Augustus's words rang through the hall with absolute authority. "Rowan Reed, for crimes of conspiracy and attempted manipulation of the crown, you are hereby stripped of all titles and lands. You are banished from this kingdom. You have until dawn to be beyond our borders, or you will be hunted as a traitor." The pronouncement fell like an executioner's blade. Rowan swayed, his face going gray. "You can't. I've given my life to this kingdom. You've given nothing but poison and lies." Augustus turned his back on the broken man, a dismissal more cutting than any words. "Guards, ensure Lord Reed, former Lord Reed, finds his way to the border." Two massive warriors materialized from the crowd, flanking Rowan. As they escorted him toward the doors, he cast one last venomous look at Melissa. A look that promised this wasn't over, that even in exile, his hatred would find a way to wound her. Then he was gone, and Melissa found she could breathe again. The hall had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on Augustus and Melissa, waiting to see what would happen next. Augustus raised their joined hands, and his voice carried to every corner of the vast space. "Let it be known that Melissa Ravenscroft is under the crown's protection. Any who move against her move against us personally." His eyes swept the crowd, daring anyone to object. "She is to be treated with the respect and honor due to." He paused, and for just a moment the cold mask slipped. He looked down at Melissa with something that might have been wonder, might have been fear, might have been hope. "Due to someone the king holds precious." The words sparked another wave of whispers, but Melissa barely heard them. She was lost in Augustus's gaze, in the amber fire of his eyes, in the feeling of the bond between them growing stronger with every passing second. This was no longer a simple case of a healer helping a king. This was something far more profound, far more dangerous. And from the way Augustus was looking at her, from the way his thumb traced small circles on her palm, he felt it too. The festival swirled back to life around them, music, conversation, the dance of politics and power. But in that moment, there were only two people in the hall. A cursed king who'd found relief for the first time in 7 years. And a hidden healer who just discovered she was always meant to save him. "Dance with me," Augustus said softly, and this time it was a request, not a command. Melissa nodded, unable to speak, and let him lead her onto the floor. As they moved together, as his hand settled on her waist and hers on his shoulder, she felt the golden warmth inside her sing with rightness. This was where she belonged. In his arms. In his life. Healing not just his body but his broken heart. And perhaps, in the process, finally healing her own. The dance. Melissa had never danced before. Not like this. Not with someone watching her every movement as though she were the only person in a room full of hundreds. Augustus guided her through the steps with practiced ease, his hand firm and warm against her waist, the other holding hers with surprising gentleness. "You're trembling," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear beneath the sweeping music. "Everyone is watching us," she whispered back. "I can feel their eyes. Their judgment. Then look at me. Only at me." She did, and the rest of the hall faded. His amber eyes held hers with an intensity that should have been frightening but instead felt like coming home. This close, she could see the fine lines of pain around his eyes, the tension he carried in his jaw even now, when her presence eased his suffering. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Right now, I mean." The curse. Something flickered across his face, surprised that she would ask, that she would care. "Less than it has in 7 years. Your proximity, it's like standing in sunlight after endless winter." The golden warmth inside her pulsed in response to his words, reaching toward him instinctively. Augustus's breath caught, his hand tightening on her waist. "You feel that?" she asked. "When my power responds to you? I feel everything about you." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "From the moment you entered that hall tonight, it was like every nerve in my body came alive. Not with pain but with awareness. Of you. Only you." The music swelled around them, and they moved together as though they'd been dancing for years, not minutes. Other couples filled the floor now, but Melissa barely noticed them. She was lost in the sensation of Augustus's presence. The way his curse called to her healing light, the way their energies intertwined like threads of gold and shadow. "What's happening to us?" she whispered. Augustus's expression was raw, vulnerable in a way she suspected he rarely allowed anyone to see. "I don't know. But I know I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not after I've finally found." He stopped himself, his jaw clenching. "Found what?" "Hope," he said finally. "I'd forgotten what it felt like." Later that night, the king's private study. The festival continued late into the night, but Augustus eventually led Melissa away from the crowd, through corridors lit by floating candles, to the same private study where they'd first met. Darian followed at a discreet distance, stationing himself outside the doors. Inside, Augustus paced before the fireplace, the veneer of control he'd maintained all evening finally cracking. Melissa watched him, her healer's senses overwhelmed by the roiling storm of his emotions. Relief, fear, desperate hope, and beneath it all, an agony that never truly ceased. "You should sit," she said gently. "You're in pain." He laughed, a harsh sound. "I'm always in pain. But you already know that, don't you? You can feel it." "Yes." She moved closer, drawn by the instinct to heal. "It's like a fire inside you burning through your veins. Ancient magic. Dark magic. A curse placed on my bloodline generations ago. My father bore it. His father before him. But it manifests differently in each generation." Augustus stopped pacing, his back to her. "In me it burns. Constantly. Every moment of every day. The healers say I should have died years ago, that the pain alone should have driven me mad. But you're still here. Still ruling. Because I'm too stubborn to die. Too angry to give in." He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her heart ache. "Until tonight, I thought that's all I had left. Stubbornness and anger. And then you touched me, and for the first time since this curse awakened, I felt peace." Melissa closed the distance between them. "May I?" She held up her hands, now glowing softly with golden light. Augustus nodded, though she saw apprehension in his eyes. What will you do? I don't know exactly. But my power wants to help you. It's been pulling me toward you since before we even met. She placed both hands on his chest, over his heart, and closed her eyes. The connection exploded between them. Melissa gasped as her consciousness plunged into Augustus's body, following the threads of the curse to their source. She could see it now, not with her eyes but with some deeper sense. The curse was a living thing, a serpent of shadow coiled around his heart, its fangs sunk deep into his soul. Every heartbeat pumped poison through his system. Every breath fed the flames. This should have killed him, she thought with horror. How has he survived this? Sheer will, came a thought that wasn't quite hers, Augustus's voice in her mind, deep and resonant. I refuse to let it win. I can see it. I can see all of it. Her power surged, wrapping around the cursed serpent in threads of gold. So much worse than I imagined. Don't, Augustus's mental voice was sharp with fear. Don't try to remove it. It's too deeply rooted. If you pull it free it could kill me, or destroy you. I'm not trying to remove it. Melissa let her empathy flow freely, not just her healing power but her understanding, her compassion. She felt Augustus's pain as though it were her own, 7 years of agony compressed into a single moment. But she also felt his strength, his determination, the core of iron will that had kept him alive. You're magnificent, she thought, wonder coloring the words. You've been fighting this alone for so long. Carrying this burden without letting anyone see. Something shifted in Augustus's mental presence. Surprise. Disbelief. You don't see a monster? I see a man who refused to break. Who protected his kingdom even while he was being destroyed from within. Her golden light intensified, not attacking the curse but soothing it, coaxing it to loosen its grip. You're not broken, Augustus. You're wounded. And wounds can heal. The cursed serpent hissed and coiled tighter, fighting against her intrusion. Pain lanced through Melissa's hands, up her arms, but she held firm. She poured empathy into the darkness, not pity but understanding. Even this curse had been born from pain, from ancient betrayal and suffering. Peace, she whispered to it. Rest. You don't have to fight anymore. The serpent's thrashing slowed. Its grip on Augustus's heart loosened fractionally. And for the first time in 7 years the curse retreated, not gone but dormant. Sleeping. Melissa pulled back, gasping, and found herself leaning heavily against Augustus. His arms had come around her at some point, holding her upright. They were both shaking. What did you do? He breathed. It's quiet. The pain is barely a whisper. I convinced it to rest. Not forever, I'm not strong enough for that yet. But for now. She looked up at him, seeing the wonder in his face. The curse isn't just magic, Augustus. It's a living thing born from trauma. It responds to emotion. To empathy. No one's ever approached it that way. They've tried to cut it out, burn it away, drown it with potions. His hands tightened on her shoulders. But you talked to it. Like it was a wounded animal that needed soothing. Because that's what it is. And you, she touched his face gently, you've been wounded too. Carrying this alone. Letting it make you hard and cold so you could survive. Augustus closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I didn't think anyone would ever understand. Would ever see past the monster the curse has made me. You're not a monster. You're. The door burst open. Darian stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but we have a situation. Augustus straightened, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the king. What is it? Rowan Reed. He's not going quietly. Darian's eyes flicked to Melissa. He's gathered supporters, minor lords who'd rather see the throne pass to someone uncursed. They're demanding an audience, claiming the king is being manipulated by dark magic. Of course they are. Augustus's voice was cold fury. How many? 20, perhaps 30 wolves. Not enough for a real threat, but enough to cause trouble. Darian hesitated. They're specifically calling out Miss Ravenscroft. claiming she's a witch who's ensnared you. Melissa felt ice flood her veins. They'll want to arrest me. Burn me. They can try. Augustus's hand found hers, his grip protective and possessive. But they'll have to go through me first. Augustus, you can't fight 30 wolves. Not when, she gestured to his chest, not when we just got the curse under control. Watch me. His eyes blazed. I will not let them touch you. There's another way. Melissa's mind raced. Let me speak to them. Let me show them what I can do. Absolutely not. If they see you as a threat. They already see me as a threat. But if I can prove I'm here to help, not harm. She squeezed his hand. Trust me. Augustus looked torn between protecting her and trusting her judgment. Finally he turned to Darian. Where are they? The main courtyard. Making quite a spectacle. Then let's give them a better one. Augustus's smile was sharp and dangerous. Gather the full court. If Reed wants to make accusations, he'll do it in front of everyone. The courtyard, midnight. Torches ringed the vast courtyard, casting dancing shadows on ancient stone. The crowd had swelled, word of the confrontation spreading like wildfire through the festival grounds. Hundreds of wolves filled the space, divided into clear factions. On one side Rowan and his supporters, faces twisted with righteous fury. On the other, those loyal to Augustus, waiting to see what their king would do. And in the center, Augustus and Melissa, standing together. You come before your king making wild accusations. Augustus's voice carried across the courtyard with ringing authority. Speak your grievances, Reed, so all may hear your supposed evidence. Rowan stepped forward, emboldened by the crowd at his back. This woman, this creature, has bewitched you, your majesty. Since her arrival you've made irrational decisions. Banishing loyal servants. Elevating a nobody. Can you not see? She's using dark magic to cloud your judgment. Murmurs of agreement rippled through his supporters. Dark magic, Augustus repeated flatly. Based on what evidence? She burned me with a touch. She glows with unnatural light. And now, suddenly, the curse that's plagued you for years is conveniently lessened. Rowan's voice rose. She's feeding on your pain, your majesty. Using it to strengthen herself. More murmurs, louder now. Even some of Augustus's supporters looked uncertain. Melissa felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, felt their fear and suspicion pressing against her. Her hands began to glow, responding to her emotional state, and several people gasped and stepped back. You see? Rowan pointed at her. She can't even control it. She's dangerous. You want to see dangerous? Melissa's voice rang out, clear and strong. She was done hiding. Done making herself small. You want to see what my power really does? Before Augustus could stop her, she stepped forward into the open space. The golden light around her hands intensified, spreading up her arms across her chest, until she was glowing like a living flame. My power responds to pain, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. To suffering. It doesn't feed on it, it heals it. Watch. She turned to the crowd, her empathic senses reaching out. There, a young woman near the front, face pale, one hand clutching her side. Melissa moved toward her. You're injured, she said gently. A training accident 3 days ago. The healers said it would take weeks to mend. The woman nodded, eyes wide with fear and hope. May I? Melissa asked. After a moment's hesitation, the woman nodded again. Melissa placed her glowing hands over the injury, and golden light poured into the wound. Within seconds the woman gasped, straightening, the pain gone from her face. It's healed. Completely. Melissa moved through the crowd, finding others, an old man with aching joints, a child with fever, a warrior with a sword wound that had festered. One by one she healed them all, her power growing stronger with each act of compassion. The courtyard fell silent except for gasps of wonder and the soft sounds of weeping from those who'd been freed from pain. Finally, Melissa returned to the center, turning to face Rowan. Does this look like dark magic to you? Does bringing relief and healing look like the work of a creature? Rowan's face had gone ashen. His supporters were melting away, unwilling to stand against someone who just healed their friends and family. She's still unnatural, he tried weakly. No one should have that kind of power. Enough. Augustus's voice cracked like a whip. He moved to stand beside Melissa, his hand finding hers. You speak of unnatural power, Reed? Look at what natural power has done to me. 7 years of suffering. 7 years of watching my kingdom while fighting to stay conscious through the pain. And in one night, this woman has given me more relief than an army of traditional healers. He raised their joined hands, and even in the firelight, everyone could see the way gold and shadow intertwined between them. Melissa Ravenscroft is not a threat to this kingdom. She is its salvation. My salvation. His eyes swept the crowd. And she will remain at court as my personal healer and advisor. Any who have issue with this decision may take it up with me personally. The challenge hung in the air. No one moved. No one spoke. Rowan looked around desperately but found only hostile faces. His coup had failed before it even began. Guards, Augustus said quietly. See that Lord Reed reaches the border by dawn. If he returns, he will be executed for treason. As Rowan was led away, broken and defeated, Melissa felt the tension drain from her body. Augustus's arm came around her shoulders, steadying her. Are you all right? He murmured. I think so. I've never used that much power before. I'm exhausted. Then let's get you somewhere you can rest. He looked down at her, his expression soft with something that might have been awe. You were magnificent. Terrifying and magnificent. I was terrified, she admitted. Yet you stepped forward anyway. To protect me. To protect us. His hand tightened on her shoulder. You're far braver than you know, Melissa Ravenscroft. As they walked back toward the palace, the crowd parting respectfully before them, Melissa felt the last of her old life fall away. She was no longer the hidden girl, the shameful secret. She was a healer. Augustus's healer. And perhaps, she thought as his hand found hers again, something more. The morning after. Melissa woke to birdsong and sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the royal gardens. For a moment she lay still, marveling at the silence inside her own body. The golden warmth that had been so insistent, so overwhelming for weeks, now pulsed with a steady, peaceful rhythm. As though it had found what it was searching for and could finally rest. A soft knock came at her door. Miss Ravenscroft? The king requests your presence at breakfast. She dressed quickly in another gown Lady Margot had provided, this one a deep forest green that made her violet eyes seem to glow. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. This woman looked confident, purposeful. Beautiful even. When did that happen? She wondered. When did I stop seeing the girl Rowan wanted me to be and start seeing who I actually am? The answer came immediately. When Augustus looked at her and saw not a tool to be used or a shame to be hidden, but someone precious. Someone powerful. She followed the servant through winding corridors to a private dining room she hadn't seen before. It was smaller than she'd expected for a king's breakfast chamber. Intimate, with windows overlooking a rose garden and a table set for two. Augustus stood when she entered. He wore simpler clothes than last night's formal attire. Just dark trousers and a white shirt open at the collar. But what struck her most was his face. The tension lines around his eyes had softened. His jaw was relaxed. He looked younger, lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. You slept well? He asked, gesturing for her to sit. Better than I have in years. She settled into the chair he held for her. And you? How do you feel? Like I'm alive for the first time since this curse took hold. He sat across from her, his amber eyes warm. The pain is still there, I can feel it beneath the surface, waiting. But it's distant. Manageable. Because of you. Melissa felt heat rise to her cheeks. I only did what my power guided me to do. You did far more than that. You stood before a hostile crowd and proved your worth. You defended not just yourself but me. Us. He reached across the table, his hand palm up in offering. I don't think you understand yet what that means to me. She placed her hand in his, feeling that now familiar spark of connection. Tell me then. Augustus's fingers curled around hers, gentle but possessive. I've ruled alone for 7 years. I've had advisors, generals, servants, but no one I could trust with the truth of what I suffer. No one I could be weak in front of. The curse forced me to be hard, cold, merciless, because any sign of vulnerability would have been exploited. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Until you've seen me at my weakest, felt my pain as though it were your own, and you didn't flinch. Didn't judge. You just helped. That's what healers do, she said softly. No. That's what you do. Because it's not just about the healing power in your hands, Melissa. It's your heart. Your empathy. The way you see past the surface to what someone truly needs. His grip tightened. I need you to understand something. What I'm about to propose, it's not just political strategy. It's not just because your power can ease my curse. It's because when I look at you, I see the future I thought I'd lost. A future where I'm not just surviving but living. Melissa's heart hammered against her ribs. Augustus, what are you saying? I'm saying that today at the closing ceremony of the mating festival, I'm going to announce my choice. And if you'll have me, if you're willing to bind yourself to a cursed king and a broken kingdom, I want that choice to be you. The world seemed to tilt. You want me as your queen? I want you as my mate, my partner, my equal. He stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other for days. But the bond between us, you feel it, don't you? It's not just my curse calling to your power. It's something deeper, older, as though our souls recognized each other. Melissa looked down at him, this powerful king kneeling before her, and felt tears prick her eyes. I feel it. I felt it since before we even met. Like I was always meant to find you. Then say yes. Stand beside me. Help me heal not just myself but this kingdom. Be my light in the darkness. She cupped his face in her glowing hands, seeing hope and fear warring in his expression. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Augustus surged upward, pulling her into his arms. For a long moment, they simply held each other, golden light wrapping around them both like a blessing. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of you, he whispered. You already are. The closing ceremony, noon. The great hall had been transformed once again. Every noble house in the kingdom had gathered, dressed in their finest, all waiting to hear which woman the Alpha King had chosen. Speculation had run rampant through the morning. Some still insisted on one of the highborn ladies, others whispered about political alliances. No one expected what was about to happen. Melissa stood in the antechamber with Lady Margot, who was making final adjustments to her gown. This one was a masterpiece, white silk embroidered with golden thread in patterns of roses and wolves, the king's colors woven together. A delicate crown of gold leaves rested in her dark hair. You look every inch a queen, Lady Margot said, her eyes suspiciously bright. I've served the royal house for 30 years, and I've never seen the king look at anyone the way he looks at you. I'm terrified, Melissa admitted. What if the court rejects me? What if they see me as nothing but a commoner who used tricks to ensnare their king? Then they're fools. And the king will make sure they know it. Lady Margot squeezed her shoulders. Have faith, child. In yourself and in him. The doors opened. Darian appeared, looking uncharacteristically nervous. It's time. The king is about to address the court. Melissa took a deep breath, smoothed her gown and stepped forward. The hall fell silent as she entered from the side entrance. Every eye tracked her progress as she made her way to the front, where Augustus waited on the dais. He stood before his throne, regal and commanding in full ceremonial armor, but his face softened when he saw her. He extended his hand. She took it, and together they faced the assembled nobility of the kingdom. Lords and ladies of the realm, Augustus's voice rang out, powerful and clear. You have gathered here for the mating festival, where tradition dictates the Alpha King must choose a mate to secure his line and strengthen his rule. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. You expected me to choose from among the highborn, the powerful, those who could bring wealth and political alliances. His eyes swept the room. And I will not lie, such considerations have merit. A king must think of his kingdom's future. Melissa felt her stomach drop. Was he changing his mind? Had she misunderstood? But Augustus's hand tightened on hers, and when he continued, his voice was filled with conviction. However, I have learned something in my years of suffering under this curse. True strength is not always loud. True power is not always obvious. And the most valuable gifts often come in unexpected forms. He turned to face Melissa fully, and the entire court watched with held breath. Melissa Ravenscroft came to this festival not seeking power or status. She came because I demanded it, because I had heard whispers of a healer whose gift defied explanation. What I found was so much more than I expected. His voice softened, becoming intimate despite the hundreds listening. I found someone who looked at a cursed, dying king and saw not a monster but a man. Someone who faced down a hostile court to prove her worth. Someone whose power flows not from cruelty or domination, but from empathy and compassion. Golden light began to glow around Melissa's hands, responding to the emotion in his words. For 7 years I have ruled this kingdom while fighting to simply survive each day. The curse that plagues my bloodline has made me hard, cold, merciless, some would say. He addressed the crowd now. I have been the king you needed in times of war and threat, strong, unyielding, feared. But I could not be the king you need in times of peace. I could not heal the wounds in this kingdom because I could barely survive my own wounds. He raised their joined hands and the golden light spread, wrapping around both of them. Melissa Ravenscroft has not only eased my suffering, she has shown me what true strength looks like. It looks like standing before a crowd that fears you and choosing compassion over revenge. It looks like healing those who hate you. It looks like seeing the broken pieces of something and believing they can be made whole again. Augustus's voice grew stronger, filling every corner of the vast hall. Today I exercise my right as Alpha King to choose my mate. And I choose not based on bloodlines or political advantage. I choose based on strength of character, on power of spirit, on the capacity to lead this kingdom not through fear, but through understanding and compassion. He turned to Melissa, going down on one knee before her, before everyone. The court gasped. A king did not kneel. Not for anyone. Melissa Ravenscroft, will you accept me as your mate? Will you stand beside me as queen, not beneath me as subject? Will you help me transform this kingdom from one ruled by strength alone to one guided by both strength and mercy? Tears streamed down Melissa's face. She had spent her whole life being told she was nothing, worthless, ashamed to be hidden. And now the most powerful man in the kingdom knelt before her, offering not just his hand but his heart, his throne, his future. I will, she said, her voice clear despite the tears. I accept you as my mate. I will stand beside you, heal with you, rule with you. Always. Augustus rose and the golden light exploded outward, washing over the entire hall. Melissa felt her power surge, not to hurt but to bless. Everyone in that hall felt it, a wave of warmth and peace and hope that swept away doubt and fear. When Augustus kissed her, sealing their bond before the kingdom, the hall erupted. Not with polite applause but with genuine joy. Because everyone there had felt it, the rightness of this choice, the promise of healing not just for their king but for the entire realm. When they finally broke apart, Augustus's eyes were brighter than Melissa had ever seen them. My queen, he murmured. My king, she replied. He turned to address the court once more. Let it be known throughout the kingdom, Melissa Ravenscroft is now queen, my chosen mate, and she will rule beside me with full authority. Her word is my word. Her will is my will. His voice hardened slightly. And any who question her right to this position will answer to me personally. The message was clear. The court responded with bows and pledges of loyalty, though Melissa could see calculation in some eyes, resistance in others. Change would not come easily. There would be challenges ahead. But as Augustus's arm came around her waist, as she felt the bond between them sing with rightness, Melissa knew she was ready. She had spent too long being silent, being invisible. No more. She was a healer, a queen. And she would fight for this kingdom, for this man, with everything she had. Together? Augustus whispered in her ear. Always together, she promised. And as the court celebrated around them, as the future stretched out bright and uncertain, Melissa Ravenscroft, no Queen Melissa Mason, smiled and stepped forward into her new life, hand in hand with the king who had chosen her, and whom she had chosen in return. Later that evening, after the celebrations had finally died down, Melissa stood on the balcony outside Augustus's private chambers. Their chambers now, she reminded herself, looking out over the kingdom that was now partly hers to protect. Augustus joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Having second thoughts? About you? Never. She leaned back against him. But about everything else? I'm terrified. I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know politics or strategy or, compassion. Healing. You know how to see what people truly need, not just what they say they want. He pressed a kiss to her temple. That's worth more than all the political training in the world. And the curse. She turned in his arms to face him. Today was wonderful, but we both know I haven't cured you. Just postpone the worst of it. Then we'll work on it together. Every day we'll chip away at it until we find a way to break it completely. His hand cupped her face. For the first time in 7 years, I believe it's possible. Because I have you. Melissa placed her hand over his heart, feeling the curse still coiled there, dormant but not defeated. We'll heal you. I promise. We'll heal each other, he corrected. And then we'll heal this kingdom. As they stood together under the stars, golden light and shadow intertwined, two broken pieces made whole, Melissa felt peace settle into her bones. She had been hidden, oppressed, told she was worthless. Now she was queen. And she was only just beginning. 3 months later, the blood moon rising. Melissa stood in the royal observatory, watching the sun set in shades of crimson and gold. Tonight was the blood moon, a rare celestial event that occurred once every 7 years. The same cycle as Augustus's curse. She had known this night was coming. Had felt it building for weeks as Augustus's pain gradually intensified despite her daily healings. The curse was waking up, preparing for something. And tonight, under the blood moon, it would reach its full power. You should rest, Darian said from the doorway. The king's beta had become a trusted friend over the past months. You'll need your strength tonight. I can't rest. Not when I can feel him suffering. She pressed her hand against the window. Down below, in the throne room, Augustus was conducting the evening council session, maintaining his composure even though she knew every breath was agony. It's getting worse, Darian. Faster than before. He knows. We all know. The warrior moved to stand beside her. The curse always peaks during the blood moon. It's when his father died. And his grandfather before him. But Augustus won't die. Melissa's voice was fierce with conviction. I won't let him. The healers say. The healers have never dealt with power like mine. She turned to face him, her eyes blazing with determination and golden light. I've been preparing for this. Studying the ancient texts, learning everything I can about this curse. It's not unbreakable, Darian. It's just that no one has ever had the right key. And you think you do? I know I do. She placed her hand over her heart, where the bond with Augustus pulsed with steady certainty. Because the curse isn't just dark magic. It's a test. A trial by fire that each generation must face. Most die fighting against it, trying to cut it out or burn it away. But that's not how you defeat something born from pain and betrayal. How then? Melissa smiled, though it was edged with fear. You don't defeat it. You heal it. You show it that love is stronger than hate, that mercy is more powerful than vengeance. You give it what it's been seeking all along, release. Darian studied her for a long moment. You're going to do something dangerous tonight, aren't you? I'm going to do what I was born to do. What Augustus and I were destined to do together. She straightened her shoulders. When the blood moon reaches its peak, I need you to make sure we're not disturbed. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, don't let anyone enter the king's chambers. Do you understand? Melissa? Promise me, Darian. This is between Augustus and me. Between the curse and our bond. No one else can be part of it. The beta's jaw tightened, but finally he nodded. I promise. But if you get him killed, I'll hunt you through the afterlife itself. If I get him killed, I'll be right there beside him. So you'll have to hunt us both. She managed a weak smile. Now go. Tell the council the king needs to retire early. Tell them anything you need to. Just make sure we have tonight. As Darian left to carry out her instructions, Melissa turned back to the window. The sun had fully set now, and the moon was rising, huge, red, and ominous. It looked like an open wound in the sky. Tonight, she thought, feeling her power surge in response to the lunar pull. Tonight we end this one way or another. The king's chamber, midnight. Augustus knelt in the center of the room, his entire body locked in agony. The cursed serpent had awakened fully, thrashing inside him, burning through his veins like molten metal. Sweat poured down his face. His hands were clenched so tight his nails had drawn blood from his palms. Melissa, he gasped, you need to leave. It's too dangerous. If the curse lashes out. I'm not leaving you. She knelt before him, her hands already glowing with brilliant golden light. We knew this night would come. We've been preparing for it. You can't? He broke off with a strangled cry as another wave of pain crashed through him. Can't heal this. It's too strong. Too old. Every generation has tried. Every generation fought against it. We're going to do something different. She cupped his face in her glowing hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Augustus, look at me. Focus on me. His amber eyes were nearly swallowed by darkness, the curse trying to consume him from within. But he found her gaze and held it. I need you to trust me, Melissa said. What I'm about to do, it's going to hurt. It's going to feel like I'm tearing you apart. But you have to let me in completely. No walls, no defenses. Can you do that? If it means ending this curse. It's not just about the curse anymore. Her voice softened. It's about us. About the bond we've built. Every moment we've shared, every healing, every conversation, every touch, all of it has been leading to this. We're not just King and Queen Augustus. We're mates, soulbound. And that bond is the key. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're going to use our mate bond to reach the curse's heart. I'm going to show it that love is real. That healing is possible. That pain doesn't have to last forever. She pressed her forehead to his. But I need you with me. Every step of the way. Together, Augustus. Always together. Always, he whispered, and she felt his mental shields drop completely, leaving him vulnerable and open to her. Melissa took a deep breath and plunged them both into the depths of his curse. Inside the curse. It was like diving into an ocean of fire. Melissa gasped as the cursed serpent's full power crashed over her, threatening to incinerate her consciousness. But she held firm, wrapping herself in golden light, letting her power flow through the mate bond that connected her to Augustus. I'm here, she sent to him. I've got you. Melissa, it's too much. Nothing is too much. Not when we're together. The cursed serpent reared up before them, massive and terrible, its form shifting between shadow and flame. It was ancient beyond measure, born from a betrayal so profound it had echoed through generations. As Melissa looked at it, she saw the faces of all who had borne this curse. Augustus's father, his grandfather, back and back through the centuries to the first Mason king who had been cursed for sins Melissa couldn't quite perceive. "You've suffered too," she said to the serpent, not fighting it but acknowledging it. "You were created from pain. From rage. From a wound that never healed." The serpent hissed, confused by her approach. Healers always tried to destroy it, to cut it out. This one was talking to it? "You weren't meant to torture forever," Melissa continued, letting her empathy flow freely. "You were meant to be a test. To see if any Mason could learn what the first one never did. That power without compassion destroys everything it touches." She felt Augustus beside her in this mental space, his presence a pillar of strength despite the agony. "My ancestor was cruel," he said. "I've seen the records. He ruled through fear and violence. Destroyed anyone who opposed him. And someone cursed him for it," Melissa finished. "Someone he hurt so badly that their pain became this. A living reminder that cruelty always comes home to roost." The serpent's thrashing slowed. It was listening. "But Augustus isn't like his ancestor," Melissa said, turning to face her mate. "He's suffered under this curse his entire life, and it hasn't made him cruel. It's made him strong. Compassionate. He rules not through fear but through justice. He's learned the lesson his ancestor never could." She reached out, placing one hand on Augustus's chest and the other on the serpent's shadowy form. "It's time to let go. Time to release this pain. The cycle ends here. Tonight. With us." The serpent recoiled and Melissa felt its resistance. It had existed for so long, known nothing but rage and vengeance. How could it simply stop? "I'll show you," Melissa said gently. And then she opened herself completely, letting the serpent feel everything. Every moment of her own pain, Rowan's cruelty, the years of being told she was worthless, the loneliness of being hidden away. But also every moment of healing, finding her power, meeting Augustus, learning to stand tall, becoming queen. She showed it that pain could be transformed, that suffering didn't have to be eternal. More than that, she showed it the love she and Augustus had built. Not the easy love of fairy tales, but real love forged in darkness and trial. Love that chose to stay. Love that healed. The serpent shuddered. And then, impossibly, it began to weep. Tears of shadow fell like rain, and where they landed, they transformed into golden light. The curse was crying, releasing centuries of accumulated pain in great, wrenching sobs. It had been waiting so long for someone to see it, to understand it, to give it permission to finally rest. "Let go," Melissa whispered. "You've done your duty. The lesson is learned. It's time to sleep now." Augustus moved beside her, adding his voice to hers. "Thank you for teaching my bloodline what we needed to know. Thank you for your service. But we release you now. In love and gratitude we release you." The serpent's form began to dissolve, breaking apart into streams of light and shadow that swirled around them. The curse was unraveling not because they destroyed it but because they'd healed it. Given it what it had sought all along: acknowledgement, understanding, and finally peace. As the last threads of the curse faded away, Melissa felt something new take its place. A blessing where the curse had been. A gift born from their willingness to face the darkness with compassion. The curse had tested them. And they had passed. The king's chamber, dawn. Melissa gasped as she was pulled back into her body. She was lying on the floor, cradled in Augustus's arms. The blood moon had set, replaced by the first golden rays of dawn streaming through the windows. "Augustus." Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I'm here." His voice was strong, clear, without the edge of pain that had always underlain it. "Melissa, I'm here. And the curse, it's gone. Completely gone. You can't He broke off with a strangled cry as another wave of pain crashed through him. Can't heal this. It's too strong. Too old. Every generation has tried. Every generation fought against it. We're going to do something different. She cupped his face in her glowing hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Augustus, look at me. Focus on me. His amber eyes were nearly swallowed by darkness, the curse trying to consume him from within. But he found her gaze and held it. I need you to trust me, Melissa said. What I'm about to do, it's going to hurt. It's going to feel like I'm tearing you apart. But you have to let me in completely. No walls, no defenses. Can you do that? If it means ending this curse. It's not just about the curse anymore. Her voice softened. It's about us. About the bond we've built. Every moment we've shared, every healing, every conversation, every touch, all of it has been leading to this. We're not just King and Queen Augustus. We're mates, soulbound. And that bond is the key. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're going to use our mate bond to reach the curse's heart. I'm going to show it that love is real. That healing is possible. That pain doesn't have to last forever. She pressed her forehead to his. But I need you with me. Every step of the way. Together, Augustus. Always together. Always, he whispered, and she felt his mental shields drop completely, leaving him vulnerable and open to her. Melissa took a deep breath and plunged them both into the depths of his curse. Inside the curse. It was like diving into an ocean of fire. Melissa gasped as the cursed serpent's full power crashed over her, threatening to incinerate her consciousness. But she held firm, wrapping herself in golden light, letting her power flow through the mate bond that connected her to Augustus. I'm here, she sent to him. I've got you. Melissa, it's too much. Nothing is too much. Not when we're together. The cursed serpent reared up before them, massive and terrible, its form shifting between shadow and flame. It was ancient beyond measure, born from a betrayal so profound it had echoed through generations. As Melissa looked at it, she saw the faces of all who had borne this curse. Augustus's father, his grandfather, back and back through the centuries to the first Mason king who had been cursed for sins Melissa couldn't quite perceive. You've suffered too, she said to the serpent, not fighting it but acknowledging it. You were created from pain. From rage. From a wound that never healed. The serpent hissed, confused by her approach. Healers always tried to destroy it, to cut it out. This one was talking to it? You weren't meant to torture forever, Melissa continued, letting her empathy flow freely. You were meant to be a test. To see if any Mason could learn what the first one never did. That power without compassion destroys everything it touches. She felt Augustus beside her in this mental space, his presence a pillar of strength despite the agony. My ancestor was cruel, he said. I've seen the records. He ruled through fear and violence. Destroyed anyone who opposed him. And someone cursed him for it, Melissa finished. Someone he hurt so badly that their pain became this. A living reminder that cruelty always comes home to roost. The serpent's thrashing slowed. It was listening. But Augustus isn't like his ancestor, Melissa said, turning to face her mate. He's suffered under this curse his entire life, and it hasn't made him cruel. It's made him strong. Compassionate. He rules not through fear but through justice. He's learned the lesson his ancestor never could. She reached out, placing one hand on Augustus's chest and the other on the serpent's shadowy form. It's time to let go. Time to release this pain. The cycle ends here. Tonight. With us. The serpent recoiled and Melissa felt its resistance. It had existed for so long, known nothing but rage and vengeance. How could it simply stop? I'll show you, Melissa said gently. And then she opened herself completely, letting the serpent feel everything. Every moment of her own pain, Rowan's cruelty, the years of being told she was worthless, the loneliness of being hidden away. But also every moment of healing, finding her power, meeting Augustus, learning to stand tall, becoming queen. She showed it that pain could be transformed, that suffering didn't have to be eternal. More than that, she showed it the love she and Augustus had built. Not the easy love of fairy tales, but real love forged in darkness and trial. Love that chose to stay. Love that healed. The serpent shuddered. And then, impossibly, it began to weep. Tears of shadow fell like rain, and where they landed, they transformed into golden light. The curse was crying, releasing centuries of accumulated pain in great, wrenching sobs. It had been waiting so long for someone to see it, to understand it, to give it permission to finally rest. "Let go," Melissa whispered. "You've done your duty. The lesson is learned. It's time to sleep now." Augustus moved beside her, adding his voice to hers. "Thank you for teaching my bloodline what we needed to know. Thank you for your service. But we release you now. In love and gratitude we release you." The serpent's form began to dissolve, breaking apart into streams of light and shadow that swirled around them. The curse was unraveling not because they destroyed it, but because they'd healed it. Given it what it had sought all along: acknowledgement, understanding, and finally peace. As the last threads of the curse faded away, Melissa felt something new take its place. A blessing where the curse had been. A gift born from their willingness to face the darkness with compassion. The curse had tested them. And they had passed. The king's chamber, dawn. Melissa gasped as she was pulled back into her body. She was lying on the floor, cradled in Augustus's arms. The blood moon had set, replaced by the first golden rays of dawn streaming through the windows. "Augustus." Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I'm here." His voice was strong, clear, without the edge of pain that had always underlain it. "Melissa, I'm here. And the curse, it's gone. Completely gone." She forced her eyes open and looked up at him. His face was transformed, still strong, still regal, but the lines of suffering had smoothed away. His amber eyes were clear and bright, no longer shadowed by constant agony. He looked younger, lighter, as though decades had been lifted from his shoulders. "It worked," she breathed. "We did it. You did it. You saw what no one else could see, that the curse needed healing, not fighting." He pulled her closer, his arms trembling. "You saved me, Melissa. Saved me in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other." She reached up to touch his face, marveling at the absence of pain in his expression. "And we saved the curse itself. Gave it peace." Outside the chamber doors they heard voices, Darian's low rumble, Lady Margot's concerned questions, others gathering. The kingdom had been waiting through the long night, wondering if their king would survive the blood moon. Augustus helped Melissa to her feet, keeping her steady when her legs shook. Together they moved to the balcony that overlooked the courtyard. Already hundreds of wolves had gathered below, their faces upturned anxiously. When Augustus stepped onto the balcony with Melissa at his side, a hush fell over the crowd. He raised his hands and his voice carried clear and strong across the courtyard. "The curse of the Mason bloodline is broken. After 7 generations it is finally ended." For a moment there was stunned silence. Then someone cheered and the sound spread like wildfire. The courtyard erupted in celebration, wolves howling their joy, people weeping with relief, the entire kingdom releasing the fear they'd carried for so long. Augustus turned to Melissa, pulling her close so only she could hear. "They're celebrating the end of the curse. But do you know what I'm celebrating?" "What?" "The beginning of our future. The first day of the rest of our lives, where I can love you without pain. Where I can rule without suffering. Where we can build the kingdom we've dreamed of." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Thank you. For seeing me. For healing me. For loving me. Thank you for choosing me. For believing in me. For showing me who I really am." She smiled up at him through happy tears. "Your Majesty." "My queen," he replied. "My mate. My heart." As they stood together on that balcony, the sun rising behind them, Melissa thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had started as a hidden girl, powerless and afraid. But she had discovered her strength, her gift, her purpose. She had been kept from the mating festival by a cruel stepfather who saw her only as a tool. But the Alpha King had demanded her presence anyway. And in doing so he had set in motion a love story that would reshape the kingdom. A healing that would echo through generations. A bond that would become legend. Melissa Ravenscroft, no Queen Melissa Mason, had been born to heal. And she had healed not just a king but an entire bloodline. Not just a curse but the wounds of centuries. And now, with Augustus beside her, with a kingdom united under their rule, with a future bright with possibilities stretching before them, she was ready for whatever came next. Together they would face it. Together they would heal it. Together they would build a realm where strength and compassion walked hand in hand. The curse was broken. The kingdom was saved. And their love, forged in darkness, tested by fire, proven unbreakable, would light the way forward for all who came after. This was not an ending, Melissa realized as Augustus's hand found hers and squeezed. This was a beginning. And she couldn't wait to see what they would create together. The gardens of the royal palace had never been more beautiful. Under Melissa's care, they had transformed into a place of healing and peace, not just for the royal family but for anyone in the kingdom who needed it. On any given day you could find children playing among the roses, injured soldiers recuperating on shaded benches, or common folk simply finding a moment of tranquility in the heart of the capital. Melissa walked through the gardens now, one hand resting on her swollen belly, feeling the flutter of new life within. The baby, their heir, would be born during the next full moon. A child born from love, from healing, from two souls who had found each other against all odds. Augustus found her by the fountain, the one they had commissioned to commemorate the breaking of the curse. It depicted a serpent transforming into a phoenix, shadow becoming light. "You should be resting," he chided gently, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her belly. "I'll have plenty of time to rest after the baby comes," she teased. "Right now I want to enjoy the garden. And the peace. And you. Peace." Augustus breathed the word like a prayer. "I never thought I'd know true peace. But this," he gestured to the gardens, to the kingdom beyond, to her, "this is more than peace. This is joy." Melissa leaned back against him, feeling perfectly, completely content. The kingdom thrived under their joint rule. The curse was gone, never to return. Their child would be born free of the shadow that had haunted the Mason line for generations. And every day she and Augustus woke up together, healed each other's small wounds, and built their future brick by brick. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for demanding my presence at that festival. For seeing me when I'd been invisible for so long." "I love you," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for answering that demand. For stepping into the light. For saving me in every way a man can be saved." As they stood together in the garden, surrounded by beauty they had created together, Melissa smiled. She had been kept from the festival, hidden away, told she was nothing. But the Alpha King had demanded her anyway. And in the end she had been everything he needed. Just as he had been everything she needed. Together they had healed the unhealable, loved the unlovable, and transformed a kingdom. And they were only just beginning. 5 years later. The throne room of the Mason dynasty had changed. Gone were the dark tapestries depicting battles and bloodshed, replaced by artwork celebrating healing, unity, and growth. Sunlight streamed through new windows that had been opened in the ancient walls, and living vines wound through the stone columns. A gift from Melissa, whose power now extended to nurturing all forms of life. Queen Melissa Mason stood before those windows now, watching her 4-year-old daughter, Arya, play in the courtyard below. The child's laughter rang like bells, and golden light already flickered around her small hands. A healer like her mother, but also strong like her father. Behind Arya, 2-year-old twin boys, Marcus and Leo, tumbled over each other in their attempts to shift into their wolf forms, supervised by a patient Darien who had become more uncle than beta. She's trying to heal the stones again, Augustus said, coming to stand beside Melissa. Even after 5 years she still felt that flutter of joy whenever he appeared. Yesterday she convinced a rosebush to bloom in winter. I suspect by the time she's 10, she'll be more powerful than both of us combined. Melissa leaned into her husband's embrace, his arms coming around her waist in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. She has your stubbornness and my empathy. A dangerous combination. Like her parents then. Augustus pressed a kiss to her temple. The council is gathering. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be. She turned in his arms, studying his face. 5 years had only made him more handsome. The absence of pain had allowed him to truly live, and it showed in every smile, every laugh, every unguarded moment. Do you think they'll accept the proposal? They'd be fools not to. But then again, councils are often foolish. His expression turned serious. But you've won them over these past years, Melissa. They've seen what compassionate rule can accomplish. They trust you. They trust us. Together, they walked through the palace corridors toward the council chambers. Servants bowed as they passed, but not out of fear, out of genuine respect and affection. The palace staff had transformed under Melissa's influence, no longer treated as invisible tools but as valued members of the royal household. Your Majesties. Lady Margot appeared, looking barely a day older than when Melissa had first met her. The council awaits. All 15 members are present, including the new representatives from the outer provinces. Thank you, Margot. Melissa squeezed the older woman's hand. How is your daughter's apprenticeship progressing? Wonderfully, Your Majesty. She says learning healing techniques from you has been the greatest honor of her life. Margot's eyes grew misty. Thank you for accepting her. For creating the Healers Academy. My family would never have had such opportunities under the old rule. The old rule is gone, Augustus said firmly. This is a new age. One where talent matters more than birthright. They entered the council chambers together, and all 15 council members rose in respect. The room itself had changed too, no longer a dark, oppressive space but one filled with light and comfortable seating arranged in a circle rather than a hierarchical line. Please sit, Melissa said, taking her own seat beside Augustus. Not behind him, not in a lesser position, but as his equal. Thank you all for gathering on such short notice. Lord Brennan, one of the older council members who had initially resisted their reforms, spoke first. Your Majesties called this session to discuss the proposed healing sanctuaries throughout the kingdom. I must say when I first heard the plan I had reservations. But after seeing the success of the pilot sanctuary in my own province. Speak plainly, Brennan, Augustus said with a slight smile. Did it work? Beyond my wildest expectations, Your Majesty. The old lord's gruff exterior cracked slightly. My grandson, you remember, the one injured in that training accident 3 years ago? The traditional healers said he'd never walk properly again. But the sanctuary healers, trained by the Queen herself, had him running within 6 months. And it's not just the healing. Crime has dropped, disputes are being resolved peacefully, the people are happy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. Happiness is a revolutionary concept, Melissa said gently. For too long this kingdom equated strength with hardness, power with cruelty. But we've proven that true strength lies in compassion, and real power comes from lifting others up rather than keeping them down. Lady Serena, a younger council member who had become one of Melissa's strongest advocates, leaned forward. The other provinces are clamoring for their own sanctuaries, Your Majesty. We could establish 20 more within the year if resources are allocated properly. Then let's allocate them, Augustus said decisively. The Treasury can afford it, especially with the increased trade revenues from our improved relations with neighboring kingdoms. About that, Lord Garrett interjected. Your Majesty's diplomatic approach has opened doors that were closed for generations. The northern territories have agreed to a peace treaty. The eastern clans are discussing alliance terms. They say it's because other rulers want what we have, a united, thriving kingdom ruled by genuine partnership. They want the fairy tale, another council member added with a smile. The cursed king and his healing queen. It's become legend already. Melissa felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's not a fairy tale. It's just us doing what needed to be done. With respect, Your Majesty, it's far more than that. This from Master Chin, the kingdom's chief scholar. I've been documenting the changes in our society over the past 5 years. Crime rates down by 60%. Poverty decreased by half. Literacy programs reaching children who would have been invisible under the old system. Life expectancy increasing across all social classes. These aren't just numbers, they're proof that your approach works. Augustus's hand found Melissa's under the table, squeezing gently. She squeezed back, drawing strength from his presence as she always did. The truth is, she addressed the council, Augustus and I can't take all the credit. Every person in this kingdom has contributed to this transformation. Every healer who trained at the academy, every teacher who volunteered at the literacy centers, every parent who chose to raise their children with compassion instead of fear, they're the real heroes of this story. But you gave them permission to be heroes, Lord Brennan said gruffly. You showed them it was possible. That's leadership, Your Majesty. The council session continued for another hour, discussing budgets and proposals, challenges and opportunities. But throughout it all, Melissa felt a deep sense of rightness. This was what she'd been born for, not just to heal one man but to help heal an entire kingdom. Later that evening, the royal balcony. After the children were asleep and the day's duties were complete, Melissa and Augustus stood on their private balcony, looking out over the kingdom they'd transformed together. The city below glowed with lights, not the harsh glare of fear and vigilance, but the warm glow of homes and hearths, of people living rather than merely surviving. Do you ever think about that night? Melissa asked softly. The mating festival. When everything changed. Every day. Augustus pulled her closer, his chin resting on her head. I think about the broken man I was. The dying king who'd given up hope. And then I think about the woman who appeared like a miracle and refused to let me surrender. I think about the frightened girl I was. Hidden away, told I was worthless, believing it. She turned to face him, her hands on his chest where the curse had once coiled. And I think about the king who saw past all that to who I really was. Who you always were, he corrected. I just had the privilege of being the first to truly see it. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one. Finally, Melissa spoke again. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Rowan had succeeded. If he'd kept me away from the festival. Then I would have died, Augustus said simply. The curse would have killed me probably during that very blood moon. The kingdom would have fractured. Rowan would have seized power and ruled with the same cruelty that cursed my bloodline in the first place. Darkness would have won. But it didn't. No. Because you were brave enough to accept my summons. Strong enough to face down a hostile court. Powerful enough to see a curse that needed healing and love it into peace. His hands cupped her face. You saved me, Melissa. You saved all of us. We saved each other, she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him. That's what love does. It saves us from our worst selves and shows us our best possibilities. The kiss deepened, 5 years of partnership and passion flowing between them. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, both were smiling. Come to bed, my love, Augustus murmured. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new opportunities. But tonight let's just be us. Man and wife. Mates. Two souls who found each other against all odds. Always together, Melissa agreed, using the words that had become their private promise. Always, Augustus echoed. As they turned to go inside, Melissa paused for one last look at the kingdom spread below them. 5 years ago she had been nobody, A hidden girl with a dormant gift and no future. Now she was queen, mother, healer, leader. She had power not because she'd seized it, but because she'd earned it through compassion and courage. The kingdom had been broken, fractured by centuries of harsh rule and the shadow of the curse. Now it thrived, united, peaceful, growing stronger every day. Not through fear or cruelty, but through the radical idea that every person mattered, that strength and compassion could coexist, that healing was more powerful than harm. And at the center of it all stood two people who had been broken themselves and had chosen to heal together rather than suffer alone. Their bond, forged in pain, tested by darkness, proven unbreakable, had become the foundation upon which a new kingdom was built. Melissa thought of all the young girls out there like she had been, hidden, diminished, told they were less than they were. And she hoped that when they heard the story of the cursed king and his healing queen, they would understand the real message. You are not what others say you are. You are not defined by your circumstances or limited by others' expectations. You are powerful beyond measure, capable of extraordinary things, worthy of love and respect and recognition. All you have to do is believe it. And then step forward into the light. As Melissa followed Augustus into their chambers, as she felt his arms wrap around her once more, as she surrendered to the love and peace they had built together, she smiled. The curse was broken. The kingdom was healed. Their children would grow up free and strong. And the bond between her and Augustus, soul deep, unshakable, eternal, would light the way for generations to come. This was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of a legacy that would echo through time, proof that love could conquer darkness, that compassion could heal wounds, that two broken souls could become whole together and in doing so transform the world around them. Queen Melissa Mason had been kept from the mating festival by a cruel stepfather who sought to control her destiny. But the Alpha King had demanded her presence anyway. And together they had created something beautiful. Something lasting. Something that would endure long after they were gone. A kingdom built not on fear but on hope. Not on cruelty but on compassion. Not on power over others but on the power of love. And that, Melissa knew as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, was the greatest magic of all.
Thanks for sticking with us to the end. I'm sure you were captivated by the story. But the adventure doesn't stop here. We've got even more heart-pounding, jaw-dropping tales waiting just for you. Tap the image on your screen now to dive into the next one and keep the excitement going.